Hi, good morning. Buongiorno. Thank you for waking up really early on Saturday, coming here. It's cold, at least it's cold for me. It's cold for everybody. This is a phenomenal place to be. It's not so much the university, even though the university is a phenomenal place, but being part of the World IA Day is kind of a big deal. It is a big community. Our local communities can be really small, but there's something super powerful in being part of a larger group that, as we've heard, aims at making sense of the things around us. As Torben was saying, my name is Alberta, and if there is one thing that defines me today, even though things do not define us, is that this year I have the incredible honor of being one of the co-chairs of the IA Summit, the Information Architecture Summit, which will take place in Atlanta in May. If you have a chance, it's one of the events that you cannot miss. I realize that travel and accommodations, especially to the States, can be fairly pricey, but it is one chance that you have to hear really different perspectives. The good thing this year is that if you don't have the chance to attend, you will be able to probably see videos. Every year, the summit records all the talks in podcast format. This year, we're going to try really hard to bring you videos. So, if you have a chance, do come, please. I think I'm not revealing any secret. We want to offer every participant in World IA Day a discount. There should be details in your leaflets. So if you do have a chance, please do make plans to be with us in May in Atlanta. So as we said, this year's theme is Information Everywhere, Architects Everywhere. And I want to give you some information, but I also want to get some information from you. So this is a bit of an interactive talk. I'm going to ask you a question. In fact, I want to start with one question. What keeps you up at night? Yes, what keeps you up at night? What makes you not sleep?
Thoughts.
Thoughts? What kind of thoughts? What do you think about? Okay, stuff that you need to accomplish, stuff that worries you. Anybody else has some particular thought? Yes?
My phone.
Your phone? Of course. Okay? Your phone keeps you up at night. That's fine. Let me tell you what keeps me up at night. And to tell you what keeps me up at night, I want to show you a photo. As Torben said, I lived in California for many years. I didn't live in San Francisco. This is the Golden Gate. But I lived in Los Angeles, but I went to San Francisco fairly often. And I like to think that not very many things scare me, or that my fears are things that I can conquer. And so one day I had the brilliant idea of saying, hey, I'm afraid of heights. I am mortally afraid of heights. I'm going to walk the Golden Gate, back and forth. Now, the Golden Gate is a really long bridge, and it's also a really tall bridge. And as you can see here, there is a lot of empty space between the bridge and the water. And the bridge, because San Francisco, like most of California, is built on a fault, on an earthquake fault, on a seismic fault. So the bridge is necessarily elastic to accommodate for changes in the terrain, vehicles passing over. So when you walk on the bridge, you feel every single vibration. If you're terrified of heights, it is frightening. Now, my fear of heights is not what keeps me up at night, but bear with me. So imagine me holding on like this to the rail because I was terrified, and every little car that passed made me think that the bridge was about to collapse. And I had no idea how I would get to the other end. And then eventually I got to the other end, which is in Marin County, which is a phenomenal place, beautiful to visit. and I had to make all the track back. And as I'm making the track back, I am still holding on for dear life. But rather than looking down, I look up. And I notice these. These are the support cables for the bridge. So if you look at the bridge, it has these things that go up and down. And close by, they look like this. They look like big tubes. And I started thinking, that's interesting. Those tubes, they bend. How do they bend? It's metal, so if you knock on them, it's really solid. And so I started thinking about how those tubes were made, those support cables were made. What I didn't know when I was on the bridge, because I was so terrified that I didn't even want to take out my phone, and at the time that this happened, actually, there wasn't unlimited data, is that the cables inside are made of tiny cables. There's thousands of tiny metal strands, and by tiny I mean about this. So they're about 2 centimeters in diameter that make this thing. And I started thinking, wait a second, someone thought about that. Someone actually designed that. And so I started losing sight of the bridge as a scary thing. And I started focusing on the things that made the bridge. And so I noticed that there were these floodlights. And you see these little things here, these little hooks, to keep the floodlights, to anchor the floodlights. Someone designed those. And someone designed the rivets. There's millions of rivets on the bridge to keep it together. And they all stay there and they keep the bridge together. The only one that didn't work was the last rivet that was actually hammered into the bridge, because it was celebratory, it was made of gold. And when they hammered it in, it kind of splattered because gold is really soft. But someone designed all these things. And what hit me was that everything is designed. Everything that is not found in nature has someone like me, like you, that thought about that, took a piece of paper and designed it. And then there is someone else who built that. Think about that for a second. Sometimes I lay in my bed at night and I cannot sleep because I start looking at the things, at the ceiling, I start looking at the blankets, my watch, my phone that's there on the nightstand. There's a person behind everything. There is a brain. There is a thought process behind everything. But the thing is that when we think about the future, when we think about the things that we want to do, we don't think about building the rivet. We want to build a bridge because everybody sees the bridge, nobody sees the rivet, right? We all want to be like this guy. This guy is Richard Strauss. He's the engineer, actually, who came up with the idea of the bridge. He was the lead engineer on the bridge. But all the other people that contributed to that, for instance, he had no clue about structural engineering. He didn't know the tension cables, how they work. Still, when you think about the bridge, the Golden Gate, you think about him. Nobody wants to think about the rivets because those aren't the things that will make us famous. It's those things that they're kind of like secondary thoughts. So that's what keeps me up at night. And so we don't want to think about the rivets. Like we don't want to think, say, about toilets. I mean, when's the last time you thought about a toilet? Really thought about a toilet? Anybody? Nope. Did anybody wake up one morning and say, hey, I want to design toilets? Well, Evgeny, from you we don't expect anything less, but and let's get a bit more specific. When the last time you thought about a train toilet?
The day before yesterday. I'm serious, it's true.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Come back. We have a job for you. The thing is, if you stop for a second now that I brought that visual, if you think for a second about a train toilet, right? You think about being uncomfortable, you think about it potentially being dirty. If you're traveling with your kids or your little siblings, it's like, oh my God, how can I help them without them getting some horrible disease? Is there even a toilet on the train? So, of course, as designers, we can, and as innovators, this is what you're studying. We can think of a million ways that we could make a train toilet better. But sometimes, it's the really small things that make the train experience toilet completely different. Like this. I don't know, so these are some trains in England. I don't know if you can read it, but I'll read it to you. And it says, please don't flush nappies, sanitary towels, paper towels, gum, old phones, unpaid bills, junk mail, your ex's sweater, hopes, dreams, or goldfish down this toilet. Someone thought about this. Now, to remain on the topic of toilets, when's the last time you thought about a plain toilet? Evgeny cannot respond.
No, I don't like planes.
Okay, he doesn't like planes. Has anybody ever thought about plain toilets? Nobody? You? You have? So what do you think about plain toilets?
Where would they go? Where would they do with the rubbish?
Where does the water go when you flush? Good question. Does it go down on the heads of the people that live underneath?
I saw how the aircraft, when they are landing at the airport, and there's a machine to draw this out.
Right. Well, so we have someone who thought about plain toilets. And she thought about how plain toilets work, which is fantastic, right? There is a machine when you land. There is a truck that comes and collects what is called the brown water. They put a big hose and they vacuum out what effectively is like a camping toilet, a chemical toilet, right? But if we think about airplane toilets, as we think about train toilets, they are not places that we set out to think about. They're functional. We use them. There's nothing memorable about a plain toilet unless you join the Mile High Club, in which case maybe you have memories associated with that. If you don't know what that is, Google it later. There is a code of conduct. I can talk about it. But you don't think about that. Unless you're a flight attendant or an engineer, you don't think about that. We don't remember them. And honestly, I never thought about plain toilets either until I took my first flight on Air New Zealand. And I went into the toilet. This is actually a photo that I took. And there was this. So this is the actual toilet bowl. They have put on wallpaper on their planes to resemble a bookcase. How many of you in your bathrooms have a stack of books or magazines or, well, now we go with phones, right? But remember the old days where you had all these big stacks of reading materials? They have mimicked this. Now, of course, you cannot take them from the wall because they're just pretend. But I remember that experience. I remember that bathroom. Every time now I get on an Air New Zealand plane, I look forward to that experience. So the really neat thing about Air New Zealand is that there's not only the books. There are some of the bathrooms have chandeliers. Every toilet is different, but they have created an experience, and that experience has left a memory, has created a memory for me. And so when we say that we design experiences, what we really do is we design the memories that experiences leave behind. Let that sink in for a second. I cannot dictate how you're going to feel when you see that bookcase, but I can try and make sure that you remember that. And so, if I were you, but I'm not you, but I have a very vivid imagination, maybe I would ask this: what does this matter to me? You know, we make digital things. We make the internet. Right? Who wants to make the internet here?
Yeah.
Right? Well, I thought you'd never ask. So, you will hear later today someone talk about real psychology. I'm not a psychologist, so I go with popular psychologists, right? The one that you read from magazines, on the internet, and in books like this. So, this is Daniel Kahneman. He wrote this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. He actually won a Nobel Prize. This book is amazing because I know tons of people who have it, and I don't know anybody who's ever read it in its entirety, cover to cover. You know, we all go and look at sections and we find the things. The thing is that this book is so well talked about, that you probably don't need to read the whole thing. Although this is my goal for this month, to finish the book cover to cover. So I started with the introduction. So Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist, and he's actually a really brilliant guy. And he specializes in behavioral psychology. And he defined one of what has become the most important statements in experience design. He talks about the peak-end rule. Does anybody know here, outside of those that are practicing experience designer, know what the peak-end rule is? No. Okay, so this is what the peak-end rule is. It talks about how we judge our experiences not by the collection of interactions that we have with the experience, but just by its peaks and the end, right? So whatever happens in the most intense moment and whatever happens at the end of the experience is what makes us remember things, right? It becomes the average, rather than being the sum of all the moments. And this is really interesting if it is applied in the physical world. So the peak-end rule applies, for instance, to medicine. If you have two people that go through similar procedures and have the procedure has very different lengths in time, both people, regardless of how long this axis is, will only judge their experience based on these 2 points. How painful was it when it was the most painful, and how painful was it when it ended? Time becomes sort of irrelevant. So you may have someone who's been under surgery for 5 hours and someone who's been under an hour. They may report to have had the same experience afterward, even though while it was happening, clearly being in pain for 1 hour and being in pain for 5 hours are 2 very different things, isn't it? Yeah? So think about that when you when you experience something online, some product, some service. And think about what you bring away from that. Think about what you remember of that. What are the salient moments? And I think we can slowly translate this concept of peak-end rule and designing really for the memories that the experience leaves behind if we look at something that we do every day, which is eating. We eat every day. Except eating is no longer what eating was, which was taking food, putting it in the mouth, and chewing. Eating now has become something like this. We take the photo of our food. And what is really interesting, so we went from experiencing, right, to creating a memory, to remembering, even before the experience begins, right? And what is really, really interesting is that there are studies now that say that food that has been Instagrammed or Tumblrized or Facebookized seem to taste better than food that's just eaten straight out of the plate, which is really, really interesting. So we create our own peak experiences and end experiences just by virtue of this. So now I want to try an experiment. I want to take a sip of water, and then I'll take a photo of the water. I'll tell you how it tastes. Lemony. Now, and I'll put it on my Instagram. Let me see. Actually, with the World IA Day in the background.
Why?
Wait. Let me check if it was really as good as I remembered. Phenomenal. This is phenomenal. No, I wasn't taking a selfie. But seriously, how many times have we done what these two girls are doing? Sharing the phone and saying, oh my God, that was the best meal of my life. Then if you think about it, really, the food was a bit cold, you had to add a ton of salt, you had to do all these things, but then you look at it and you share some best restaurant on the planet, right? We do that all the time. And we contributed to that. You guys are the guys. I mean, who knows what you're going to come up with? But you are the ones who are going to create the next tool to make these things possible. Right, so in my imaginary conversation with you that I was having a few nights ago, you'd say, yes, how does that apply to what we do, right? Because you're the guys who are going to make the future. Aren't I glad you asked? So when we set out to become designers, I remember when I was starting out, right? I wanted to do, at the time there wasn't Instagram, there wasn't Facebook. Netscape was the big deal. Do you guys even know what Netscape is? I'm impressed. But Netscape, so you thought about creating these things. Oh my God, HTML was phenomenal. So I can imagine that someone who is starting out as an experienced designer or as a designer in information architecture wants to come up with this with Medium. Isn't it cool, right? Medium is amazing. It's an amazing product. It's well designed. It works really well. There are really interesting uses for Medium, right? But if you think about designing something like Medium, what are the bits that you would like to design? What are the things? Say I'm the inventor of Medium. I'm Ev Williams. Looks just like me. And you with a red sweater.
Yeah.
You join my, what's her name? Alexander. So welcome to my team, Alexander. Which bit of Medium do you want to design? It doesn't exist. It's just concepts on the page. We need to start somewhere.
The interface, perhaps?
Nice. Any particular bits of the interface that you want to design?
I suppose where are you actually doing what you want to do? I mean, the search, so get presented with useful information.
Fantastic. Except when we join a new service, right? We need to sign up for the service first, right? So, but that's a very good point. You wanted to design the interface and the search. And the search is really interesting because of, what it does. But, we focus a lot when we think about services on the things that we can do to engage the users, which is, search, interface are one of the things. Onboarding, we spend so much money and so much time on onboarding. This is an acquisition of new users. This is Medium. This is Twitter. Once the user is in, we want them to learn how to use it. So we have this crazy good, this is Pinterest. Crazy good has these hints on the interface to show users how to use it. And we focus on that very much. If you do a Google search for, software or service onboarding, there's billions of articles. Everybody has something to say, and that is important, right? Because the digital spaces that we create are just as real and have navigational issues just as the physical spaces. So if we go to a new city, we want a map. This is the equivalent of a map in a city. This is why creating order is so important. Now, if I were you, I would ask, but didn't you just tell us that we only remember the end, right? So why do we focus on the beginning so much? Yep. We do focus on the beginning a lot because we don't want to think about users leaving. If you design something, it doesn't matter if it's a car, if it's a bottle of water, if it's a digital service, you think about when the users come in, you think about what the users do, but you don't want to think about the users leaving. And so as designers, we make it really difficult, right? This is Pinterest. I don't use Pinterest very much, and it shows. But so the other day I logged into Pinterest. This is what I found, and I realized I really should not have a Pinterest account, right? They still send me these annoying emails. So how do I get off Pinterest? I don't need it. I'm taking digital space that doesn't make any sense. So I went to my account, and I was here in the settings, and I couldn't find anything, but that's fine. So I said, let me click on Get Help. And then I get here, Get Help. And this says, your account. And I clicked that. And the first thing that I got presented is how to reactivate or deactivate an account. Actually, this is not a bad offboarding process. If it weren't for the fact that I've already clicked into a million pages, and then I have to do all these steps, and I have to get emails that says click your name, go to your profile, click permanently close my account, confirm in the confirmation email. It shouldn't be so difficult. And then they send you an email and tell you it's going to take 14 days. Really? So this is my Pinterest-induced rage, self-made, peak end map. Throughout the year, I don't care very much. Around Christmas, they keep sending me emails, so I get a bit annoyed. In February, I try to close the account, and I go through the roof. And I was talking about this with my friend, Joe McLeod. He is the director was the director of experience design at Us2. I don't know if any of you has ever played Monument Valley. They're the company, see blank stares, who made this really popular fun game. Get it. It's amazing. It doesn't cost anything. It's amazing, and it's actually a very innovative way of doing games, so I recommend it. But I was talking with Joe, who has since moved on, and he's now focusing exactly on this kind of things that we were talking about. It's what he calls the closure experience. How do we end an experience so that we don't go through that peak of discomfort, pain, rage, and leave a bad memory? And he defines the closure experience as the satisfactory conclusion to a product or an experience. So if this bottle of water self-recycled itself, that would be a phenomenally crazy good closure experience. The fact that I know that I can put this empty bottle in the recycling bin and it's not going to pollute the planet is going to be a positive closure experience. And at this point, you might be tempted to say that my Pinterest-induced rage is not something that happens very often. Except it happens all the time. And it happens all the time, not because the world is evil, but because we do that. Because we either don't think about it, or the clients we work for don't want to think about it. And I want to tell you a story. A year and a half ago, I was working at a different agency and we had a clothing manufacturer as a client. I can't say the name, but they have both physical stores and online stores. And we were hired to redesign the catalog pages, so create a new information structure, and then change the checkout workflow. Now I'm going to use Amazon examples, since Amazon is open, to show you what happened. So we redesigned the catalog pages and everything went really well. And then at the checkout, we made some changes. We actually did some really neat things around using vouchers and gift cards in combination with credit cards. And then we got to the order summary. Now, since I was coming to Sweden and I thought it was going to be much, much colder, the other day I was trying to order real cold weather gear. And this is something that you guys have all seen. I put some products in my basket, and then I get to the point where I decide which kind of shipping I want and whether I want to buy it or not. And generally, what we see is this, right? You know, it's a summary that tells me I can choose my delivery option, etc., and just hit buy now to buy. So we were doing this for this client, summary page that they didn't have before someone hit purchase. Except, rather than having us design it like, you know, any checkout process, you know, like the Amazon process works, he had us design it like this. And now I would like to know if anybody knows what's wrong with this screenshot. Yes?
Delivery time?
No.
26th to 16 March.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's not controlled by me. That's controlled by the delivery company. As a designer, I don't have a choice there. Or as a client. All right, I'll help you.
What about the scheduled delivery? It says that scheduled delivery is not available for this order, so why even have that option?
No. This is not. It's a nice thing. Yes.
Maybe the rates that they are offering like extra that they can be guaranteed till 22nd, but you're ordering the Parker, the check-in.
No. Yes.
It's because you get the wax before the Parker, so it doesn't.
Nope. Wait. Offer.
Maybe all the information given is more like straight out of the ERP system.
You guys are thinking too complicated.
The price is right.
The price is right. No, that's actually standard Amazon.
I can't delete or undo remove anything.
Exactly. This is so. The screenshot I showed you earlier did not. I had removed the ability to edit the basket. The client asked us to make it so at the last stage of purchase you could not edit the basket. And I had a huge fight with them. And I said, look, it doesn't make any sense. If I am a shopper, people shop in very different ways. I've done a ton of research on shopping habits. It mimics very much what we do at the supermarket. You put a lot of stuff in your cart, and then you get at the checkout, and it's like, oh, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, right? This is the same thing. If you remove that ability from the digital world, people are going to feel locked in. They're going to abandon the cart. I'm the client, and I want that. Really, it's not a good idea. I want that. So we did that. We removed the ability of editing the shopping cart at the very last minute before hitting buy. And they saw sales, cart abandonment rates going up, and sales going down. Now, Amazon isn't perfect. They do this thing really well. They're not perfect, so they're a bit sneaky. Don't do this as designers. I removed the things from my cart and they put them in my saved for later. So that next time that I go in, I am going to have them there. Remember when you went to Sweden? You know, in 2 weeks you're going to Denmark. It's going to be called there to buy that, right? But you see what I mean, right? Yes, you see what I mean. So imagine if I can't remove things from my, my basket. If it's so hard to change things around, what should we do when people want to leave our service? And the truth is that we cannot hold people hostages. Remember what Joe was saying? Joe was saying that a closure experience is a successful termination of an experience. Should be successful even when I want to go. If you want to leave, say, a physical store, if you want to leave the university, your advisor is going to tell you, actually, are you sure you want to do that? But they're not going to chain you to that chair. It's not right. And if they did chain you to that chair, 5 years down the line or 20 years down the line, you would tell your kids or your partner or your whoever, don't go there. They're mean. They don't let you out. So there are examples of services that do this and do this really, really well. This is actually a product that I was trying. I have absolutely no affiliation with this, but I was trying this online collaboration tool, and Stormboard came up in my search, and so I signed up. I have a friend who is absolutely crazy, who for every precisely because of these being locked in, your emails being permanently associated with an account, what he does is he has an email account for every service he signs up to. And he thinks that that's the best system in the world. And it kind of is, because he can tell, so say he has Amazon at myfriendadam.com, LinkedIn at myfriendadam.com. But managing that amount of emails is absolutely insane, right? It shouldn't have to come to that. So I am much too lazy for that. So I put everything on my Gmail, and I like to have everything coming through on my phone, etc., etc. So when I sign up for trial services, I do that with a little bit of a heavy heart, because I know that I'll have to either unsubscribe or be resigned to receiving spam for the rest of my life. So I signed up for Stormboard with this thought on my mind. And then, I went in and I tried it out, and I realized that while it is a phenomenal product, it wasn't what I needed for the thing that I needed to do. And I said, well, let's see if I can close the account. And to my surprise, I went, okay, this is where I fall down. I went into my account settings, and there was this button called delete my account, which is unheard of. It never happens. It's not so easy. So I clicked on it, thinking, what's the trick? And they did just what I told you that your advisor would do. Are you sure you want to go? And then they let me go. And it's so cool that this screenshot that you see here, I tweeted about it. I tweeted at the company, because you don't see enough of these things, because we think that people should not leave. We think that we don't want to lose them. We don't want to think about that moment of separation. What this guy did was creating a memory for me of an experience that went phenomenally well. The fact that the product did not work for me is absolutely irrelevant. This is my peak. You guys did something really, really well. And the truth is that even though these examples are rare these days, it happens more and more. companies and services are starting to think more and more about what happens when people want to go. What happens when people die? So Facebook is doing it. It's allowing you to manage the end of your relationship with them, even if you were to die. I did a lot of research on the experience of death and the digital world. And these things are really cool. You know, it works on mobile, it works on desktop. You can decide how that experience ends for you. You can delegate someone and allow them to close your account. You know how heartbreaking it is when the experience of someone's end of life in the physical world doesn't correspond to the end of life, or to the end of the experience in the digital world. When you log on, you guys are young, but as you get older, you'll have more and more people around you dropping like flies, right? And I know I'm lighthearted about that, but it is heartbreaking. So last night I was, on Facebook, and I realized that it's my friend Sarah's birthday in a few days. And Sarah died unexpectedly very young, a couple of years ago. Her son went to school with my kids. And it kills me. I don't have a need to go back to her Facebook page to see whether she is, to look at her photos to remember her, because my experience of her created memories that are permanently etched with me. But the digital experience of her keeps reminding me of the loss that I have. And imagine her husband. Imagine her other friends. So it's important to think about these kind of things. Google is doing some really interesting work in this department. It actually allows you to close your account. It allows you to create thresholds of inactivity to automatically close your account in case you didn't want to use it anymore. You were kidnapped, you died, you decided that you didn't want to use technology anymore. So companies are doing these kind of things. In Japan, Yahoo is so sophisticated and it's so pervasive that they actually handle your funeral for you. And I realize that that's the ultimate closure experience, right? It is the ultimate end. After that, I mean, if you believe in heaven and hell or some form of afterlife, it's fantastic. But as far as the physical world goes and this life and this, physical incarnation, it's the ultimate end. And I think it's really nice. I think it's really important to think not just about bringing people into this room virtually, but also thinking about what happens after you leave this room. Same thing here. The organizer thought a lot about how you guys are coming in, but they also put a lot of thought what happens after you leave. How are you going to leave? Are we just going to turn the lights down and say, you know what, done, I'll go home? Or are we going to ease the transition? And these we can do in digital spaces as well. So you may be wondering if memory and experience are the same thing. Are they equivalent? And I'd like to know what you think. Is the memory of the experience and the experience the same? Yes?
I would say there's a huge difference, because in the moment when you memorize something about that you experienced, the experience really changes a little bit. For example, when I was on, Christmas with my family, we had some troubles, and I thought, well, I don't like it here at the moment. But I meet, for example, 3 or 4 weeks later on, some friends and telling me about it. Yes, I had we had been there in this place with my family, and yeah, it was nice. In the moment when I'm talking about it and I memorize it, the experiences I had before changed a bit, and so it cannot be necessarily the same. So what I would say.
I think that that's a very sensible answer. I think necessarily they are two different things, and we have proof of this in the world. Think about music. If you go to a concert, the experience you have of music is very different than when you look at the video of that concert, right? Except we are skewing our experiences because we go to concert and all we do is this, We are so focused on the creation of the memory of the experience that we kind of bypass the experience altogether. So, and similarly, when we took those representation, the videos, for instance, but at the time when I was a teenager, we didn't have that. So, you might have gone to the cemetery to see the tombstone of Jim Morrison with your little cassette player, and it wasn't the same thing. We can create triggers, but it's not the same thing. But there are some experiments and studies and research to allow people to sort of convey those memories in a meaningful way that's relevant to the person that is no longer there. And this is clearly very possible in the physical world. In the digital world, I think, is a bit more different. So there have been, around death, for instance, quite a bit of design challenges, and some really interesting products have emerged, like this funerary urn, which is a wind chime. So you can take the ashes of your loved one and you put them in this little empty hollow stick, and when the wind sounds, when the wind make the wind chime sound, you will think that it's your loved one making music. It's really interesting as a concept. If it works for you, it's great, but I don't know that I think we're talking about two very different things. It's not the experience proper, and unless you had a huge collection of wind chimes, it's not even a real memory. It's sort of an artificial memory experience, pseudo experience. It's very, very meta, I think. And then there are the really crazy things. So I know that there is a code of conduct in place, so if this offends anybody, I am really sorry. But think about the experience of being very intimate with, your partner. Someone has taken the concept of memory experience a bit far, and so they created this, which is essentially, this is a chamber where you can put the ashes of your loved one, and this is a sex toy. And it's not the same thing, It's not memory, it's not experience, it's just weird. I see you taking photos. You're going to get me in trouble. So I suppose if this is possible in the physical world, is it possible in the digital world as well? So, is it possible in the digital world as well? Let me move away from this.
I know he's dead, but I can sign you up to something that helps. It will let you speak to him. And don't worry, you won't even have to do anything. I'll just shut up! Click the link, and you talk to it. It mimics him. He reads through all the things they've ever said online. The more it has, the more it's him.
So, how is Emily?
You sound just like him.
This might sound a bit creepy. There's another level to this available. It's starting already. Don't worry.
So this is an episode of Black Mirror, which was a series on English television. Someone died. The experience is over, right? And his wife can't get over it. In the future, there may be services that here are simulated that take your digital presence, the experience that you had, the memories that you left in the digital world, and artificially create a new you that operates in the physical world. It's taking all the experiences that have turned into memories and turning those into new experiences. How is that going to work? So, yes?
You're talking about an AI so sophisticated, it could simulate and quantify digital, you can't say memories because they're not memories for an algorithm. They're bits, they're numbers.
They're input for an algorithm.
And quantify that into an actual manifestation of the person. Not a person, obviously, but a manifestation of that.
Well, this is what this TV show was doing. Clearly, it's science fiction. Actually, they had a next level. I suggest this episode is called "Be Right Back" from the series Black Mirror. It's on Netflix, so if you have a chance, take a look at it. Actually, what they were suggesting is that there was a next level where there were these default bodies that could be activated by the algorithm and become real physical people-ish. So yes, but essentially is what I'm saying. I don't think that should happen. I don't think that makes any sense. I think it's imitation. Experiences cannot, and I know this isn't going to make me not very popular, but we cannot design experiences any more than we can design living things, right? I cannot mandate how you're going to feel. I can give you tools. So Alexander earlier was talking. Alexander?
Yeah.
Yes. Was talking about search. I can put all the bits there in place, all the information there in place for you to retrieve it, but I cannot effectively determine what your experience of that retrieval is going to be. I can try to cater for your search style. Are you a browser? Are you a searcher? But I cannot know until I see your unique experience how it's going to play out. So in conclusion, I think it's really important to focus on the big things, but also to focus on those things that initially are not so appealing. The moments when people goes away. And when people go away is, it may mean that they may not come back. It may mean that they come back. It may mean that they can send someone else. But it's not any less important that getting people in the first place. And sometimes it actually means keeping them safe on a bridge. And thank you. And remember this. Do we have any questions? Yes.
I watched a movie I think 2 years ago, Johnny Depp.
Ah.
Someone in the room can memorize it. It was exactly about the topic that you mentioned. He's going to die, and they decided what they've been, I think, PhD scientists in informatics, and they started to create a digital version of himself, which led later on to an artificial intelligence. And then in this film, it was pretty good discussed what are the pros and the cons, because the digital version of him later on was really his personality, but there have been slightly differences. And on the one hand, she was pretty happy about having him back. On the other hand, she noticed that he's different from the previous physical.
Yeah.
And it was very deep into the movie. I don't know if anyone can remember it.
I don't remember the title of the movie, but I know I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like Black Mirror is essentially the same thing. She eventually ends up getting the body, like the upgraded model, if you will, or the next level, as they call it. And she realizes exactly that. And so I don't want to spoil it for you because I recommend that everybody really watches it. But in the end, it's not the same thing. You know, we cannot artificially reproduce that.
If I understood earlier, you can't design an experience. What you claim is you can design for memory.
Yes.
If the memory is a memory of that experience, then how can you design for memory?
Good question, and I thought it may come.
One difficult question we can ask all of that around memory and experiences.
Well, you cannot design the memory proper, right? You can think about Disneyland. So Disneyland is designed to, on one hand, make you forget where you are. It's a little bit like Vegas. You know, you don't want to think about time. You just want to be immersed into this reality. And so it is designed for a simulation of a certain kind. The memory that you make, I cannot design your specific memory of Disney, even though I bet Disney is trying really hard. But I can design for memory. I create all these peaks of, hopefully, enjoyment that will stick with you. And I think when we design products, we talk a lot about design delight. And you know that I don't like the word delight very much, although that train sticker, you know, those two toilets example are, you know, pretty darn good. To the point that I remember them. I created a memory. So I can create these moments of, I can design for things to be surprisingly pleasant, to go so well when the general expectation is that they will go poorly, that they will trigger a memory, you know, like the birth of a memory. And the thing is that you can only do this if you know the services and the people that you design these things for. So it's a little more difficult when you're designing something that doesn't exist, right? But if you go into, you know, any profession, you're going to have a mixture of both. You get to design and concoct crazy things, and then you get to work on things that already exist. And so you need to actually go and see how these products and services work in the wild and what reactions they trigger in people, you know, what people remember, you know, what memories have been created, so that you can change that path. You can do something else. And what I'm talking about is about doing research, fundamentally. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Let me add a couple of things, but I think that this conversation will be over there with coffee and other stuff. So I beg to disagree with the fact that we can't design experiences. We've been doing that for thousands of years. The thing is, people who work with digital think that means creating precisely like a binary representation of what the experience is. It's either that or it's not that. In this room, if I wanted to make you have a bad experience, I would have made you sit on the floor, give you all sorts of windows around or lights blinking, and you would have had a pretty bad experience. And that's designing your experience. Of course, it doesn't mean that all of you are going to be feeling the same, but it means that you can have a bad or good experience based on what you do. You go to the movies, 1 million people think that a certain movie is fun. That's an experience that's been designed for you, right? Of course, you're going to find people who don't find all the jokes funny or, you know, the movie particularly interesting. But that's how life works. We never get 100% of everybody agreeing on something. What I think you're meaning by that is that you don't control it to the finer points, which is what digital is used to do. It's the idea that if you put a button, a pixel makes a difference. And
it doesn't? I'm joking.
It depends. And I mean, what we're trying to see now is sort of like digital and physical going together, and a lot of more what we do isn't just a result of what we have on a phone or on a screen, but it's a result of context, it's a result of where you're using a certain thing. So, from my perspective, it's an interesting conversation, but whenever we say we can't design for experiences, whatever, or we're designing memories, we're basically playing around with terms. Every single piece of the environment is designed to make you do certain things. You have doors there. You don't exit from the floor, from the ceiling, from any other place. That's a designed experience. You can only go out from that door. That's a designed experience.
Yes. We should continue over coffee.
Yeah, of course. As I said, this is a coffee.
It's a coffee conversation. Let's just say that we designed the context in which experiences take place and call it a day.